I'm going to let today's panelists introduce themselves, but let me just take a moment to thank you all for joining us today and sharing your expertise with our audience. One last quick housekeeping note for the audience during the panel discussion and the Q&A session. If you have any questions for our panelists, please submit them at any time via the chat feature to panel questions. And if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can use the chat feature to message tech questions. And at that point, Jeff, I will turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Carla. And hello and welcome all to our first panel discussion here focused on best practices and current and future workforce management. I'm your moderator, Jeff D'Italia with Stratacuity, and we're a life science focused search and placement firm with deep roots throughout the Boston life science community. My team of search experts and I build world-class drug discovery teams, CMC development teams throughout GXP quality, regulatory affairs, and clinical trials. In and around the Boston greater Commonwealth area. So I'd like to start first by thanking MassBioEd for hosting this event for the 5th year. We've participated each year, and this is definitely a different one for sure for all of us, but happy that we can continue this very valuable exchange of ideas and also the report that comes out annually. So it's important to continue to build the sustainable life science workforce, and their efforts have a direct correlation on the success of so many companies and the workforce that we all rely on to continue feeding that life science engine. So thank you for your years of dedication and important piece of what makes this all possible. Today, I'm joined by an esteemed panel of experts within the talent acquisition and human resources world that will share with us some ideas of what they've learned and seen during this era of remote hiring, onboarding, and remote operation of teams during the ongoing global pandemic. We'll be sure to save some time at the end for Q&A, and we have a breakout session for you all that we'll have facilitated discussions, and we'll convene back here at the end to share what we've discussed in these breakouts. So really excited to get started here. Our stacked panel of experts come from some great backgrounds with lots of wisdom to share with us. I'm pleased to welcome Mary Beth Blanchard from Paul Corporation, Tracy Nicholson from Third Rock Ventures, Sarah Regan from Thermo Fisher, and Rita Smith from AbbVie. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy days to be here with us. So let's start out by having each of our panelists introduce themselves a bit and where they're from, and provide us some insight on major changes that you've seen in hiring. And in general, have your companies continued to hire during the pandemic, and has it slowed or changed? So first up, let's start with Mary Beth Blanchard.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Mary Beth Blanchard of Paul Corporation. We're based in Westborough, Massachusetts. Paul is one of the many operating companies of Danaher. A little shout out for Danaher that Cepheid is one of our operating companies that came up with our PCR test for COVID. So woohoo, good to see that we're obviously contributing to this, getting rid of this pandemic. So currently at Paul, we continue to hire locally, nationally, and globally. Our biotechnology, laboratory, medical, and microelectronics businesses all have active recruitments. I would say for us, Jeff, that unless a candidate lives in the geography of the role, all of our interviews have been done remotely via MS Teams and has worked out really well.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary Beth. Tracy, could you share some insight on some of the changes you've seen and what's going on at Third Rock these days?
Yeah, sure. Tracy Nicholson here from Third Rock Ventures. I'm a senior recruiter there who helps out with both hiring internally for Third Rock Ventures and then also building out some of our early stage portfolio companies, usually within the first 6 months pre-launch up to a year post-launch. And then I also have some optics into what's happening at some of our portfolio companies that are part of our teams. In general, we have within Third Rock continued to hire aggressively. People, for the most part, have been able to make the switch to hiring via Zoom is mostly what we're using. And we've actually had several key hires happen since we shut down the first week of March. Our portfolio companies have had a little bit of different hiring situations depending on where they're at in their life cycle, with the largest impact probably being on companies that had clinical trials that were non-related to COVID that got impacted. Beyond that, I think, hiring has remarkably been, after the first little blip of people wondering at what's going on and how to make this work, we continue to actively recruit, actively hire, and build out our new companies.
Excellent. Thank you, Tracy. Next up, we've got Sarah. Sarah Regan, could you share a little bit about what's happening at Thermo Fisher these days?
Absolutely, Jeff. Thank you. And glad to be here today. So I'm Sarah Regan. I'm an HR leader here at Thermo Fisher Scientific. We are the world leader in serving science, and our mission is to enable our customers to make the world healthier, cleaner, and safer. And that means we have a wide range of products and services in our portfolio that really touch all aspects of the life sciences industry. And so we are also involved in the COVID space, and we've got test kits in the marketplace now. Our CEO has had the opportunity to spend some time at the White House this year, which has been quite exciting for us. And in addition, we are also a contract manufacturing organization for biotech and pharmaceutical organizations. So we may end up being on the manufacturing side of this story as well. Given the diversity of our business, we've actually seen various trends across the company with regards to hiring and other things. Some parts of our business have definitely slowed down. Others are rapidly trying to ramp up to support either COVID-19 or to continue to support our current portfolio of work that isn't affected. So I work specifically in our gene therapy contract manufacturing organization, and we continue to grow and focus on being prepared for the future growth in gene therapy overall. So just like everyone else, we've been moved to this remote environment. We're doing all of our interviewing and assessing talent remotely. We're helping to enable our managers to effectively lead and engage their teams remotely, as well as for those who are still coming on site, how to ensure that they feel safe and have a good work environment to be in. So it's definitely created a lot of interesting decision points and strategies for us to leverage.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks so much, Sarah. And last up, we've got Rita Smith from AbbVie. Rita, what's the latest happenings over there with hiring?
Hi, thank you so much, and thanks for allowing me to be a part of the wonderful conference this year. This is my first one, so be gentle with me. For AbbVie, I work for AbbVie. I'm the HR director here in the Massachusetts area. We're actually based out of North Chicago, so I moved here from Illinois. AbbVie is known for making a remarkable impact on patients' lives, and a few of our spaces are in immunology, neuroscience, virology, etc. Some folks may know us through Humira, Skyrizi are some of our products. So some of the things that we've been experiencing, well, first, let me just go back. We're also just getting through a integration. So we are now almost 50,000 strong. We just emerged with Allergan, which is known for cool sculpting, Botox, and some other areas, therapeutic areas. So we've been a little busy with that in addition to everything else that's been going on. So from the hiring and recruiting perspective, we for sure have been not seeing very much difference here locally in Massachusetts. And then when I think about across the country, my understanding is we still have had the same level of recruiting that we've always had. I think most of the panelists have talked a little bit about the blip during early days, but really have rallied strong and understood what we need to do going forward. So from all indications globally, locally, and nationally, we have been doing quite a bit of recruiting virtually. Some of the interesting things that I think that we've observed here more in the Massachusetts area is very shortly after we've begun doing the virtual recruiting and really getting our managers prepared and ready for that, we've experienced sort of even more comfort level with managers being more free because of their schedules, and the candidates being a bit more free to participate. And so we actually have seen throughput, if you like, or the time to fill openings shorten just a little bit during these times, which has been a really interesting nuance to our hiring and recruiting perspective. So things have been going really well, and we've been really pleased with how everything's been managed so far.
That's excellent. That's great to hear, and really encouraging. Not surprising that life sciences is thriving and doing what they need to do to grow and continue to meet goals. So congratulations, in making it this far, and let's hope that with the better weather in the summer months, it continues to improve even more so. So with that, we are entering summer months. Typically, this is time for internship season beginning. I'm curious how the panel is seeing internships either being impacted or not in 2020. So could you comment a bit more on that for us, Rita?
Sure, absolutely. So we took a decision back in February, kind of very soon after the COVID and pandemic began, and really wanted to be thoughtful about what we wanted to do from an internship perspective. And so when we took a look at, how important having interns is to our bench strength as a company, and particularly here in the Massachusetts area, some of the things that we've been developing and growing with our partners from a university and college perspective, we took the decision across the company that we wanted to continue our internships. And so then that led to the next question, which was, well, how are we going to do those? Certainly at the time, we were ready for the shelter in place, and we wanted to make sure that we had good, meaningful conversations across what we should do. And so we decided that we would have all of our summer programs be virtual this year, and we frankly met with each leader down to almost a nose of who already had offers extended, who's accepted offers, and wanted to make sure that we were able to pull together really great 8 to 10 week types of programs for them. So some of the things that we took a look at was just making sure that if we needed to do some more cross-functional types of assignments, just to make sure those internships were meaningful, we did that. And then we decided at the tail end, if there were any internship maybe openings that we had, if we couldn't and we didn't have any candidates for them, then we decided that we would go ahead and close those. So the internships that we did have would be the most meaningful. So we were really, that was one of our major areas that we wanted to make sure we had been very thoughtful about, and wanted to, kind of leverage the internship program and making sure that we were able to continue. It was very important to us to honor those outside commitments.
Excellent. Thanks, Rita. Mary Beth, I think we had said that you might have some ideas here as well to add as far as internships that are happening within Paul Corporation.
Sure, absolutely. For this summer, our internships are, can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, good. I just making sure. So this summer, internships for Paul and Danaher are 100% remote. The reality is our interns are the future talent pool for our operational leadership program and our general manager development program. So no pandemic is going to stop us from hiring and developing our future leaders.
Excellent. All right, good. Well, again, it's great to know that internships are continuing. That's an important part of developing the workforce and getting experience so that people know what they want to do when they graduate. And speaking of graduations, we're upon the graduation time as well. Does the panel see any impact on those who are graduating right now and potentially not finishing labs or finishing up coursework within undergrad or even graduate programs? Tracy, you're first up here. You want to share some of what you're seeing and what you've experienced on that?
So, we're continuing to hire people that are out of PhD programs. Mm-hmm. What I've seen recently is, a lot of the folks we were talking to, either within Third Rock or portfolio companies, we're wrapping up their thesis and weren't actually doing a lot of bench experiments. So they're able to, they're writing from home, and then they're having to defend via video conference, which is a little anticlimactic. But that is still working. I think one of the things that everybody's anticipating is, will this cause a minor downturn in people being able to finish up their work in the lab 6 months down the road, because they might have had to, if it was non-COVID related work, they might have had to pause and stop before they could return. And then a lot of the safety precautions are, not conducive to the typical grad student schedule of working 12-hour days.
Totally understandable. Anyone else? I think Mary Beth, did you have any thoughts to add there on recent graduates here? Or?
Sure, absolutely. So in terms of so we hire recent graduates into our operational leadership program and our general management development program. They're obviously on our OLP side, they will self-quarantine for 14 days before they go on to their first rotation. Our GMDPs are all working remotely and will go on site when the time is right and we're further along in our phased opening approach. But I don't want to rehash basically what Tracy said, but even with our PhD hires for our research groups, the one piece I would say that if anything's been a delay, it's been the background checks when you're hiring talent from other parts of the country to go somewhere. And obviously with the courts being closed, I mean, that's really kind of been the only thing that's been a impact in terms of like hiring time or getting people on board. But as long as the communication is clear, and the candidates that I've spoken to are all well aware, if they're finishing up, they've already, finished up and they've done their Zoom, dissertations. So pretty similar to what Tracy's been experiencing as well.
Excellent. So in general, overall, at all, more experienced levels or even executive or senior ranks, how does the panel see that being affected throughout the rest of 2020 here? And maybe we'll start first, whoever has thoughts on that one. I don't think we actually we haven't heard from, let's see here. Should I call upon you?
This is Sarah. I'm happy to answer that from our perspective.
Great.
So I would say for my part of the organization, which I mentioned is in the gene therapy viral vector space, viral vector manufacturing, we're continuing to hire at all experience levels. Particularly here in Massachusetts, but also in other areas where we have presence like Florida. So, that growth that we're trying to drive and the talent needs that we have will continue throughout 2020. So we have not really slowed down, we took the opportunity to pause and refocus and ensure that we were really bringing in the right talent for what we need today. And it was a good step back, but we continue to hire at pace as we would have COVID-19.
Excellent.
And Jeff, I can comment there if
Tracy,
that's okay. Yeah, so from an executive standpoint, so I worked for a venture capital firm. We raised our last fund 5 last year before any of this all happened. We have, more than $800 million that we have to spend to start new companies, and finding executive level leadership is challenging. So we've continued to aggressively look for people and, have been successful in actually identifying and hiring people. Interviewing has been easier with people's schedules all being available from home.
Sure.
So that's actually been a little bit of a blessing in disguise. And I guess the only thing I've seen perhaps a little bit is, with so much change going on, it's caused people to maybe, depending on people's personal situations, some people have retracted a little bit, especially at an executive level. Maybe this isn't the time to be leaving the stewardship of your company. And so people have been good about having future conversations for future hiring, but maybe not as much immediate hiring depending on their company situation.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely noticed the initial shock. The first month was probably the most challenging for people that were, not necessarily so active in their job search. Right. But it seems like we're through the worst of that. But any other thoughts from the group on how they see experienced recruitment, experienced talent recruitment throughout the rest of 2020 here?
This is Rita Smith from AbbVie. I do see us for sure continuing our recruiting. I don't get to see as much at the executive levels. Those are a little bit more hired in North Chicago. But for our site, we just opened up something like 10 to 12 recs for virologists. It's one of our key areas. And we've also been participating and looking for opportunities to either cure or have a vaccine for COVID. And we've been asked to do quite a bit of work there. So we've actually have almost double the amount of recruiters helping us for experienced scientists in those arenas, as well as in our neuroscience arena. So we're seeing, for sure from a business perspective, in certain therapeutic areas, definitely an uptick when it comes to, the kinds of scientists or other types of work that we need. So yeah, I see that outlook even continuing as the shelter in place starts to, this phased approach, reopening of the company. I know most of the companies are doing a very similar approach. And so we're expecting to be kind of more on-site working by the end of summer. So I can only anticipate that would just increase and get back to kind of maybe more normal recruiting efforts throughout the rest of 2020.
Excellent to hear, Rita. That's great. So with that, you guys brought up a couple of interesting points. Potentially, people who are not quite as active in their job search are potentially not interested in changing jobs at this time, or potentially, the number of active seekers is potentially less today than it was prior to the pandemic. Is that something that, as a group, have you seen that? Is that a trend, and is it, if so, is it getting any better? We're in June now, right? Better than March, better than April. Let's start with I guess Tracy from the top here. What are you seeing?
I think on the active job seeker front, you're seeing, it depends what you consider active. I think people that need to find a new job because their job is, it's time to move on, are still actively looking. I do think it's more the passive job seeker that has maybe said, I'm happy to talk about something maybe 6 months to a year from now, but I'm not really ready to make a jump right now. And then there is a third bucket, I would say, is that there's people that, due to their family circumstances, for instance, their daycare is now not functioning, or their children are home from school, just don't really have the bandwidth to think about making a move if they had been thinking about making a move, because they're doing now 3 jobs instead of 1. And some people are having a lot of trouble adjusting and managing, having their kids at home when they previously were in daycare, while they're also trying to do their job and figure out, how do I do that from home and actually have a home life if my office is my home.
Totally understandable. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Mary Beth, what are you seeing?
I would say that right now, from a passive and active perspective, there might be a slight dip in volume. We augment with our leadership development programs for some of our roles. However, we're a proactive talent acquisition team, and we make it a priority to continuously connect with talent in the science and engineering space. Obviously, we're in the customer delivery, domain, so it's important that we're constantly having, networking opportunities and career conversations, with talent, and not just in this geography, but throughout the United States, and the globe.
Sarah, do you want to share some of what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think initially when all of this really got underway, we definitely saw a decline. Things slowed down quite a bit. I think that it's starting to come back again. We are finding, that our hiring pace is on, continuing on pace as we have been in some parts of the organization. definitely trying to spend more time on some of that candidate outreach and connection as well. The other thing that Thermo Fisher is getting a bit of a lift from is the fact that our company is getting a little bit more publicity these days due to some of our responses to COVID-19. And so I think we have a little bit of a positive uplift from being in that space. Although, still a lot for people to learn about our organization overall. So in some areas, we're definitely seeing continued activity and applications and interest. But other areas, definitely a slowdown. It really depends on what region and what part of our company we're looking at.
And Rita, how about you? What are you seeing with the pipeline of candidates and active job seekers?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo, Jeff, everything that's been said already. Certainly some blips at early days. Some of the things that we've been, you've already talked about being attributed to maybe folks not wanting to take risks at this time, but other folks who may really, want to step out and do something different. So I don't think we've seen anything differently than what's been described so far.
All right, great. All right, let's move on to what we're seeing changes in the interview process. Curious about what's different now in the interview process, given that it's all completely virtual, right? I mean, each of you probably have been trained in behavioral interviewing techniques, and right, the whole process. It's you got it down to a science, and then you get thrown into this pandemic, and we're all doing this remotely from our computers. With Microsoft Teams and Zoom like this, right? So let's start out with Sarah. Tell us a little bit about how's the interview process changed over at Thermo Fisher.
Absolutely. So I would say we're finally actually using video for interviewing. I mean, we've all mentioned it, but it's been a tool we've been trying to introduce to our managers for quite a long time to help increase the pace of our interviewing process. And there's been some resistance because of that desire to meet candidates face to face. So now in this situation, we've had the opportunity to actually really move down that pathway. And I think our managers are getting, and the whole interview team is getting more and more comfortable with this approach, and the fact that you really can see people, see their facial expressions, and have a really robust discussion virtually. The other thing that I think is beneficial has been referenced briefly, but we've been able to move through the process much faster. Trying to get someone to come on site in their own schedule, particularly if they're remote and traveling, was always a challenge, would take weeks to plan. And now we can get things scheduled within days because we have a little bit more flexibility in the schedule. I don't know that people have more availability, but maybe there's some slots that are easier to jump into since we don't need to schedule everything as 1 3-hour block. It makes it a little bit easier to pull things through. So those are some of the immediate changes that I would reflect on. In addition to the fact that I'd say we're even more heavily leveraging some of the competency-based approach so that the interview team knows how to look a little bit diversely at the candidates and ask thoughtful questions on that front. I think our managers are picking that up even more than they had in the past.
So there is some efficiency improvement as you're seeing, right? I mean, as far as
yeah. Absolutely.
Move things through the process.
Yeah, I think it pulls all the way through to the decision point on the candidates.
Right.
We're able to get that panel together and get those decisions made. I think people are working through how to do that even more efficiently in this environment.
Right, and people can be more available and more readily. Maybe they're not traveling as much, right? People aren't. It seems like the focus is there, and the time. They have time available on their calendars to do this.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yep.
Excellent. Tracy, anything you'd like to add that you're noticing or you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I can just follow up with what Sarah said, which is we exactly are experiencing very similar, much easier to schedule. I think the one thing that I think has been a little bit of a challenge. So I think people have been pleasantly surprised by how effective they can video conference, because much like what Sarah was experiencing, people it was new to them, and they would do it, but they would only do it if they absolutely had to, and they found it very unpleasant. I think with everybody being on the same playing field, people have moved to it. And it is much easier to schedule different blocks of time, with an added benefit even that we're able to maybe gather some of the feedback and use that to have more robust conversations to follow up, because it's not just, you know, people handing a candidate over for an entire day. And so I think the quality of interviewing has actually improved with this process. The one complaint I have heard in general is not unique to interviewing, but it's a lot to stare at a computer screen all day. So we've had to make some adaptations to that, where we cut our meetings back to 45 minutes to give people some time away. And I think people have just had to adjust with it's not natural when you're interviewing somebody to constantly be staring into their eyes. So we have to give people advice on, you know, taking notes and looking away and doing things you would normally do when you're interacting with people in a room. So
good.
I think that's been a little learning.
Well, it's nice to know that, you know, there's some plus sides to this, right? The efficiency improvement, you know, and the ability to, you know, access your teams no matter, you know, where they might be, you know, at any given time. I remember I was hired back in the 90s off of a video interview, if you believe it or not. So it's kind of crazy how far, you know, video interviewing has become, and how, you know, incorporated and ingrained it is in day-to-day hiring. So, you know,
I bet you had to go to a video
I did.
center, because that's how I got hired too.
It was a FedEx Kinko's. Yeah. My boss was in California. Yeah. And I was, one of the.
Jeff, can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
And something that we really haven't touched upon. And I mean, the one differentiator I would say right now is the ability to hire people without meeting them is a true testament to your employer brand, your reputation, and your employees to treat recruiting like a team sport, right? So think about the scientists or engineers or accountants or HR people we may hire here at Paul. All of our customers know our products. They know their tech support people. They know we're an outstanding brand where we do outstanding science. And I think this could be a pivotal point for companies that don't have a great brand. They don't have a great reputation. There could be some game changing going on, you know, from that perspective, from a talent attraction strategy.
And Mary Beth, this is Rita, if I could just maybe add to that, I think there's also an opportunity for innovation in the candidate experience. So I know one of the things that we've done is kind of pull out some of our tours that we had video tours that people could actually go to and click on that we may have had for one purpose, but now we've pulled those out for our candidates so that they can see what it might be like when we do come back on site, or have a really nice visual, so as they're considering our offers and things like that, they know what to expect from our company. And so I think there's that opportunity also to increase the candidate experience and maybe use some of our materials in different ways.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Excellent insight, guys. Thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about onboarding. When it comes to bringing teams on board, remote training, how into your culture and make them feel ingrained while they're not actually being there, they're not on site. Is that something that you guys are experiencing? I think Sarah, you had mentioned that Thermo Fisher is doing some really innovative things. You want to share with us what you guys are doing over there?
Sure. So one of the things that's really important for any work experience, but is really valuable in the way that we get work done at Thermo Fisher, is just about the relationships and the people that you work with. And so one of the things that we've had to be really deliberate about is ensuring that our managers are really thoughtful about who are the individuals that our new hires need to be getting to know, and not just within the, so within the team as well as within the business and beyond, and really helping to map that out. Where that might have happened much more organically coming on site, it's something we have to be much more deliberate about now and really planful. Some of our managers are also, hosting virtual coffee hours or cocktail hours to welcome new hires. into their teams. So from a manager and a team perspective, those are some of the things that we've been doing. In addition, we've moved all of our sort of orientation and general welcome for employees to a virtual setting, of course. And we're trying to break that up in ways so that people don't feel like they're sitting at their desks all day, because that's what we're all doing, right? Is meeting after meeting. And typically when you're in a conference room with people, that might be okay for a half a day, but then sitting in a, staring at your laptop for 4 hours is not ideal. So we're trying to be a little bit more thoughtful about the pacing of the different things that we're doing and kind of how we educate people on our business when they join us. So those are some of the specific things that we've done in my space.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Rita, what's going on at AbbVie these days with regards to onboarding and remote training?
Yeah, so very similar to what was just described. I think we had to kind of find our way a little bit early days with regard to the orientation process and even some of the tactics of making sure people can get their, devices and laptops and phones and all of those kinds of things, virtually and remotely. And so we've got all of those pieces now locked down. I think what we've experienced also is just having, again, trying to find innovative ways to do more connections. And so we've asked our leaders and managers to be very thoughtful about how they're connecting with their new employees. How do they do good stakeholder engagement and make sure there's a good connection there? As we were just saying that oftentimes you're in a conference room and it's easier to engage and things like that. But when you need to go virtually or remotely, how do you keep those connectivity and that ability to make that connection important and what do you do, right? So some of the things that we've also been considering is just looking, externally and trying to think about, things like games. I know that some of our teams have come up with, some of these platforms and going on to like virtual Scrabble or some other type of team-oriented event or virtual escape rooms and bringing that more into the frame as they have good team experiences. So those are some of the things we've been looking at.
That's awesome. Sounds really, really
Sarah,
yeah. So go ahead, Sarah.
I have one other thing to add that I didn't think of initially, which I think is important because a lot of us still have employees that are working on site, but we have to manage to social distancing and make sure that we're thoughtful about space. And in laboratories, sometimes that's difficult. So one of the things that we have been looking at is different kinds of technology, because a lot of our learning actually is job shadowing, where you're really partnering up with someone and observing the work that they're doing or supporting an operation, which is very hands-on. And so we're actually starting to introduce some technology that allows for remote access. So you can be, say, sitting at your desk, observing what someone is doing in the lab because they have perhaps have a piece of technology that, like almost like a GoPro, but more relevant for this application. So we're using that technology for a variety of different things, but it's been really something we're trying to introduce into our onboarding and training to allow for some of that observation while also promoting social distancing.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds like you guys are using some really awesome tools and innovative ways of doing things, either on site or remote, depending on the situation here. So let's talk last about some lessons learned throughout this the pandemic here and some of the changes that we could potentially be seeing in general going forward. What are some of these what might stick here? I mean, will the remote on-site or remote interviewing versus on-site interviewing become the norm, right? Will some of this onboarding and training methods and technologies that you guys are using also become the standard? Mary Beth, what are your thoughts here?
I think if anything, it shows that you have to be agile and ready to change at a moment's notice. But that's kind of, what, life is, it seems right now. So, I think for us, the adoption, personally, I'm a huge fan of this Zoom, MS Teams, Google. I can't believe how many new technologies I've learned in 6 weeks. And considering the fact how long I've had an iPhone and I can barely figure that out sometimes. But I'm going to, and the other piece of it too is being adopters of technology, making our jobs faster, simpler, and also managing time. 'Cause it seems like time is going very, very fast right now. So for me, I think this is going to be something ongoing. And I will say not that I'm aware of, I mean, we haven't had any, negative feedbacks on the, experiences of our candidates using MS Teams or our hiring managers. So, I hope it continues. I don't think it will replace the actual interview and having somebody come to our, fabulous site in Westboro or our sites in New York or Florida. But I think it's something that we will continue to see and something that I would certainly champion.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. I mean, you guys have great world-class facilities. I'm sure you want to show those off and get people excited about the culture and what they're about to, hopefully join if they do,
Oh, absolutely.
And anyone else want to add some of what they think, might change going forward here, or what lessons we've learned throughout this pandemic?
Jeff, I'd like to maybe just comment on that. I think one of the things that we're still figuring out, but is going to be probably going into our future, I think are twofold. One, I think this idea of flexibility and flexible working, we've always embraced that. It's always been a part of our culture, but it gives it a different level in terms of, how might we continue to use what we've learned going forward in, future years, rest of the year. And a piece of that is around just being able to have a little bit more space at our facility. So we've had a lot of great growth in Worcester and Cambridge, and we see more coming down for us in our pipeline and some of our business challenges. And so one of the things we have been already working on is just how do we kind of have more people, more labs, more all of these things. And so the leadership team and I have been talking about how do we maybe parlay, if I can use that word, this more flexible working experience that we just learned a tremendous amount about, and incorporate that into future planning. So that's, I think, one kind of big piece. And I think another big piece for me is, again, this idea of being really connected and being connected on different levels. So when I think about diversity, inclusion, and all of those kinds of things, I think we have had additional learning around how do we create a more inclusive environment, particularly when you're not sitting together. And so I think we've had some really good, learnings as a result of that as well, that we're going to be looking forward to how we incorporate going forward, and how do you, expand some of that inclusion that we've been enjoying the past 6-8 weeks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to make sure we leave enough room here for Q&A. We're running lean on time here, guys. One of the thoughts was, there's just a final, kind of before we get into Q&A here, but are there gaps in training or possible need for greater flexibility in the workforce? Things like flex hours, right? Flex days. I've even heard of companies going to a 7-day work week. Choose the 5 days you want to work, right? Or the 4 days, and figure out how to get your 40 hours in. Childcare demands. I mean, until the workforce can have reliable forms of childcare, they can't get back to going on site. So what are we going to do, and what are some potential gaps here? While we work through this. Tracy, you're shaking your head a lot here.
I think we're building the plane while we're flying it, is what I was thinking. Yeah, we're doing all those things. And we're figuring out, I guess the question is there's going to be some portion of a new normal, and then some portion of a desire to return back to some of the things that we've lost with this remote access, right? So I do think that there's going to have to be, I think there's a lot of things that we're going to be able to take from this. I think there's a lot of efficiencies that have been created. I think a lot of times people spend a lot of time at work, but they're not actually productive moments. And so I think people have been coming in, being more focused about what they need to do, planning at home, come in, do the work, and leave. And because there's so much hands-off and need for communication, I think there's been a lot more ability to look at productivity. I think on an ongoing basis, how we are going to create inclusive and collaborative environments while social distancing and working remotely is going to be an ongoing lesson.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts from our panel?
I'll add that I think one of the areas that's critically important is that we're really continue to think differently about what it means to lead and manage in this environment, and the kind of communication that everyone needs to do to stay connected and engaged. We've tried to help support our managers through this transition so they are able to set expectations and support their employees, and then also help our employees think about how do they operate in this uncertain environment. There's a lot of stresses on us today that carries through to life as well as work, and how do we create an environment where that isn't necessarily something they're carrying so actively every day. So really the idea that we're now needing to connect in a different way around the whole person and who they are. And I think there's just been such deeper connections between people beyond just the work day. And I think that there's a real benefit from that that's going to carry forward as well in relationships.
It's good. It's good to sometimes, get to know your people even better, right? Get to know what goes on, not just, when they're in the 8 hours in the office, or, when we see them.
Yeah.
Definitely brings it all into perspective.